Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to really plunge into complex topics, looking for those genuine aha moments, not just the headlines. Today, we're tackling something pretty concerning, actually. It's this image of the American middle class. Well, vanishing. It used to be the absolute backbone of the country, didn't it? But now, our sources are starkly saying it's vanishing before our eyes.
Yeah, that's a powerful phrase.
And they use this analogy: our income distribution used to look like a one-humped camel,
Yeah.
a big, broad middle.
Right, stable.
But now it's more like a two-humped camel with a low part in between. That really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does, a very divided picture.
So our mission today is to really get under the hood of this growing income inequality. Why is it happening? What's driving it? And maybe most importantly, what does this huge shift mean for national unity?
That's the big question.
We've pulled together some fascinating sources: economics, history, politics. It's all in there. And for you listening, our goal is simple: cut through the noise, give you a clear, concise handle on this, maybe share a few surprising facts, and just help connect the dots. Sound good?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start right there. This core problem, the income gap widening, the middle class shrinking. What are our sources saying this is actually doing to the fabric of American society?
Well, that two-humped camel thing you mentioned, it's a really good way to visualize it. You just see fewer and fewer people sitting comfortably in that middle income bracket.
Right.
It really does look like the country is splitting, into richer and poorer groups, and that middle ground is just eroding.
And this isn't new, is it?
No, not at all. That's the startling thing. The sources point out that for median income workers, their actual earnings haven't really gone up in 40 years.
40 years, wow.
Yeah. Think about that. And just to put a number on it, back in 2014, the median income for a family of three was around $60,000. For a lot of people, it hasn't budged much since.
So the middle is just stuck.
Stuck, exactly.
Yeah.
While the extremes are pulling apart, it feels like those ladders of upward mobility, they're not just harder to climb. Maybe they're being pulled up all together for some people. It changes the whole deal, the whole social contract.
So it's definitely more than just an economic blip then. How significant was the middle class historically? Was it always this central?
Oh, absolutely critical. That's why its erosion is such a profound threat. It wasn't just, a nice feature of American life. It was essential to U.S. success in the 20th century.
So,
Well, think about it. It provided the sheer manpower needed for 2 world wars. And
Yeah.
then after that, it formed the backbone of America's economic dominance globally.
okay.
So losing that isn't just a trend, it's a fundamental shift away from a structure that worked, that was incredibly robust for a long time.
And there's data backing this up, right? You mentioned a Pew Research study. The sources talk about a figure 1.
Yes, exactly. The Pew study gives us this really stark visual. They define the middle class pretty clearly: households earning between 2/3 and double the median income.
Okay, standard definition.
Right. And what their chart, that figure 1, shows is just this seismic shift. Back in 1970, that middle group, they earned 62% of all national income. 62%.
Wow, the lion's share.
Totally. But fast forward to 2014, and that share had plummeted down to just 43%.
Huge drop. But where did that income share go?
That's the crucial part, the inequality piece. It didn't trickle down to the poor. Almost all of it went straight to the people earning more than double the median.
So basically, the rich got richer.
The rich got richer, the poor sort of stayed put, and the middle class got squeezed sharply. And this really lines up with work like Thomas Piketty's, his research showing how inequality tends to increase over time, especially since around 1970. It's like the whole income distribution is being hollowed out.
So if you're listening, this isn't just economists drawing graphs. This is a real change. It's like the wiring of American opportunity is being fundamentally reconfigured.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It impacts communities, families, your chances. It's a deep, deep shift in society's structure. Okay, so how do we even start to really understand something this big? Our sources bring up this economic model, the Lewis model, that offers a different way to look at America, maybe even a jarring one.
Indeed. It's the Lewis model, named after W. Arthur Lewis, or sometimes just called the original model of a dual economy.
Dual economy. What does that mean exactly?
At its heart, it just means you have one country, but inside it, there are 2 pretty separate economic sectors.
Like 2 different worlds.
Almost, yeah. They're divided by, different levels of development, technology, even what people demand or buy. It's a model that was typically used to understand what used to be called developing nations.
Okay, I see where this is going. The surprising part is applying that model to the United States.
Exactly. The sources argue that policies coming out of our own kind of internal dual economy are making the U.S. look more and more like a developing country in some ways.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is. And it's not just about, say, crumbling roads, though that's part of it. It's about a systemic internal divide that challenges that whole idea of shared prosperity.
You mean things we usually associate with, like the global south happening here?
That's the argument. You see examples, like you said, the deteriorating infrastructure, roads, bridges, but also the crisis in public education in many areas. If you can't afford private school or an expensive neighborhood, your kids might be in a very different system.
Right.
And a really key, maybe disturbing part of the Lewis model is that the richer sector, the upper sector, often has an incentive to keep wages down in the poorer sector.
Actively keep them down, not just market forces.
The sources suggest it can be more than just market forces, yeah? Maybe a systemic effort to maintain that wage gap?
Okay, can we make this concrete? Are there examples in the sources?
Yes, they give the example of the Boston Globe newspaper delivery drivers.
Okay.
Most of us never think about how the paper shows up, right? But for these folks, it's described as this grueling overnight marathon. And they're classified as independent contractors. So what does that mean? No guaranteed health care, no retirement plan.
The gig economy reality for many.
Exactly. Working 365 days a year for pretty low pay. Apparently, they even have to find their own replacement if they need a day off.
No way.
Yeah, and often juggling a second job just to make ends meet. Imagine that life. Every single day, no benefits, just scrambling. It really shows you life on that economic edge.
That's incredibly tough.
And the point the sources make is, this isn't just one sad story. It's presented as a sign of a much bigger trend. More and more working people are finding themselves in these really precarious situations right at the edge, even in a supposedly wealthy country.
It sounds like a structural issue, not just individual hard luck.
That's the implication.
Now, the sources also insist we can't understand this economic picture without looking at America's difficult history with race. They say it's not just context, it's woven right into this inequality.
Absolutely. It's unavoidable. If you trace it back, you go back to the 17th century. Labor shortages in North America. Europeans came as indentured servants, but Africans were brought forcibly, unwillingly, as slaves.
Right.
And slavery wasn't incidental. It was absolutely central to early economic growth, especially cotton. That fueled industry north and south. And even though the Civil War happened, the legacy of slavery, it still shapes society, shapes our economy in really deep ways, even today.
And it didn't stop there, obviously. How does that thread continue?
Well, you see it continue through big historical movements, the Great Migration of African Americans from the South to the North looking for opportunity, and more recently, the big increase in Latino immigration. The sources note that both groups often end up concentrated in that lower income sector we saw in the chart in Figure 1.
And how we talk about it matters too, right?
Yeah, that's a subtle but important point. How sometimes the public conversation about the working poor uses the word them.
Yeah.
It can implicitly lump these groups together and kind of distance their struggles instead of looking squarely at the economic forces hitting everyone in that group.
So race and class, they're distinct, but tangled together throughout U.S. history.
Incredibly tangled, from slavery right up to modern politics. And the sources make this powerful, maybe controversial argument.
Okay.
That as the income gap widens, racism can actually become a tool for the wealthy.
A tool? How?
By making poor white people feel, superior to black people, it can distract them from the fact that they might share similar economic struggles. It prevents them from uniting around economic issues.
Wow.
The sources even cite the phrase, "Make America Great Again," as potentially being a kind of euphemism in this context, maybe subtly tapping into a past with clearer racial hierarchies.
That's a really heavy claim,
Yeah.
suggesting economic forces might actually weaponize race.
It's a very strong argument presented in the sources, yes.
Which brings up a paradox, doesn't it? If this is a democracy, and there are way more people in the lower income groups than the very rich, why don't they just vote the rich out of office? Or vote for policies that help them?
Right, that's the classic median voter theorem idea, the majority should rule. But it doesn't seem to work that way, does it?
Clearly not entirely.
So the sources contrast that with something called the investment theory of politics.
Investment theory.
Yeah. It basically suggests that it's not just votes that count, but money. Campaign spending, lobbying, economic influence. These things increasingly shape political decisions.
So money talks louder than votes.
In this view, yes. It argues that your income level, not just your existence as a voter, really dictates how much you can actually participate in shaping policy. Who can afford to influence the system?
Do the sources give examples of this playing out?
They do. They point to some Midwestern states where you can see this influence quite clearly. Indiana, for instance. Governor Mike Pence, backed by hedge fund managers, pushed through spending cuts, essentially walked away from the state pension system, weakened unions.
Policies that hit working folks hardest.
Disproportionately, yes. Then Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker, he allowed corporations to donate directly to political parties, replaced nonpartisan watchdog groups with partisan ones, basically changing the rules to favor economic power. And the really tragic example is Michigan Governor Rick Snyder and the Flint water crisis.
Right, Flint.
Ignoring warnings about lead in the water in a poor, mostly black city, some called it environmental racism because of the devastating long-term harm to kids in a community without much political clout.
Just awful.
And one other point they make notice, which states rejected the free expansion of Medicare under the Affordable Care Act?
Which ones?
Mostly former Confederate states. The sources suggest this might be a kind of indirect racism. No explicitly racist language, perhaps, but policies that disproportionately harm minority communities, echoing historical patterns.
So it's this complex web history, race, money, politics, all shaping policy in ways that seem to deepen the divide.
That's the picture the sources paint.
Okay, let's pivot then. How do these big, deep issues, the dual economy, the history, actually show up in specific policies? Especially things like education and mass incarceration.
Right. Well, education first. Our sources remind us it was seen as the key to American prosperity in the 20th century. And it's still supposed to be the main path out of that poor sector into the richer one.
Supposed to be.
Supposed to be. But what we have now, effectively, are two different education systems. One, for the richer sector, quality varies, sure, but it's mostly within what we think of as the normal American experience.
Okay.
And then there's the system for the poorer sector, which is often profoundly struggling. It's almost like we're prepping kids for two totally different economic futures right from the start.
And there's a really dark irony here connected to history, isn't there?
A tragic irony, yeah. The legacy of slavery, when it was literally illegal to educate Black people, that history kind of hangs over the neglect of education for the poor today.
How so?
It often comes through in coded messages, ways of talking about urban poverty that subtly justify not investing, not fixing things, and local control of school districts, which maybe made sense way back when, now often traps kids in failing systems because funding is tied to local property taxes.
So even if you get through that system, say a Black student gets a degree, does that guarantee a path up?
Not necessarily, and that's another painful point. Those manufacturing jobs that used to be a stepping stone, many are gone. That's part of that figure 1 decline we talked about.
Right.
So an educated Black graduate often faces what the sources call a doubly hard leap to get into that higher income group. They might need even more education and still face resistance or bias in hiring for those top jobs.
And Latinos coming for opportunity face similar hurdles.
Similar challenges, yes. They came seeking good jobs like African Americans did during the Great Migration, but find fewer pathways into that upper economic tier than maybe existed in the past.
Okay, so education is one area. What about mass incarceration? The sources call it the largest unseen policy. That sounds ominous.
It is, and the statistics are, frankly, shocking. It really ramped up starting with Nixon's war on drugs. America's incarceration rate just exploded, reaching levels you'd normally only see in, like, totalitarian states.
Really?
Yeah. By the 21st century, the situation was so extreme that estimates suggested 1 in 3 Black men could expect to go to jail at some point in their lives.
1 in 3, that's staggering.
It is. And the specific data cited for 2001, 22% of Black men aged 35 to 44 had been imprisoned. Compare that to 10% of Hispanic men and 4% of white men in the same age group. It's not that Black individuals are the majority of all prisoners, but the impact on their community is incredibly disproportionate.
That must create ripples, generations of impact.
Exactly. It leads to what Michelle Alexander famously called the new Jim Crow, this devastating, vicious cycle.
Explain that cycle.
Okay, so Black men are disproportionately jailed. Black women are then under enormous strain, often as single parents. Their kids might lack resources, attend struggling schools.
Fewer opportunities.
Right, which can lead to fewer good job prospects, more contact with police, and potentially ending up in jail themselves, starting the cycle all over again for the next generation.
And politicians are debating school funding, maybe unaware of this massive systemic outcome happening alongside it.
That's the argument that these things are interconnected, but not always discussed that way.
And it's not just individuals and families, right? What about broader public investment?
That's also suffered. Investment in cities' infrastructure, public transit has often declined. The sources use strong language describing dilapidated conditions formerly found only in developing countries.
Wow. Back to that dual economy idea.
Exactly. And layered on top of all that is individual debt. Bad mortgages, student loans from for-profit colleges maybe.
Yeah.
All this debt holds people back, dampens consumer spending, and actually slows down the whole economic recovery for everyone.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly recap the main threads.
Sounds good.
We've looked at the stark reality of the shrinking middle class in America. We used that dual economy model as a lens to understand this division. And crucially, we explored how American history, especially its racial legacy, is tangled up with politics and specific policies, education, incarceration, leading us to where we are now.
Yeah, and the key is seeing how these things aren't separate issues. They're deeply interconnected systems.
Right. So is there any hope? Do the sources offer pathways forward?
Well, they do offer a glimmer. They note that while some countries have followed America's path toward greater inequality, others haven't. Yeah, some countries managed to moderate it through specific policies. They put programs in place to help ordinary people keep up, at least somewhat, with the incomes rising at the very top.
So policy choices matter. It's not inevitable.
Exactly. Which reinforces the idea that really understanding our current economic structure, understanding how history shaped it, is absolutely vital if we actually want to build a more unified nation out of our diverse population.
Which leads us to a final, pretty provocative thought from the sources. They suggest the rich in the 21st century are, quote, trying to kill the goose that laid all those golden eggs in the 20th century.
Strong words, basically undermining the broad prosperity that ultimately benefited everyone.
So the question for you listening is, how can we as a society change this trajectory? And what role does understanding all this deep dive we just took play in making that change happen? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.